earthquakes are finally good. And not only are they good, they're completely broken. Able to speed through 90s without gear, witch powers, or a brain. Yep, that's right. Deck this build out, and you'll be speed farming the highest of pits without any issues, and you'll have crazy amounts of fun doing it. Not only that though, because you can also play the Hota Splash build with basically the same gear, just making a few changes. And that, my friends, is why I'm covering both of the builds in one video, to save both you and me some time. So let's do it. First things first though, how in the hell do we even spawn the earthquakes in this build, making the big stonks possible? Well, shit, my man, it's easy peasy. For the Leapquake version, we have two ways of spawning earthquakes. First, we have Bull Kathos Aspect. This thing not only grants us damage, but it spawns an earthquake out of our asshole every time we leap. And leap, we do a lot of. Hell, it's pretty much the only thing we do playing this build. That and unspeakable things. To the ground we stand on, that is. In any way, we also have another way of spawning the earthquakes that does not involve a flaw and violating the Geneva Conventions, and that is utilizing the YUL rune in combination with tech. What this allows us to do is simple. Every time we press a cooldown, we spawn an earthquake. So every time we leap, use our shouts or any other cooldown, we're also pumping out earthquakes. Cool, huh? Damn right. Now you do also spawn an earthquake every time you overpower or ground stomp, but the amount of earthquakes from those are tiny amounts in comparison to the former two. Alright, and what about the Hota version then? How do you spawn the earthquakes in that build? Well, shit. Instead of spawning them via cooldowns, we instead spawn them via the Tam rune, allowing us to gain offering every time we spam a core skill, which Hota of course is. This does not generate the same amount of earthquakes as the Leap version, not even close, but this version of the build has another benefit: big explosions. And big explosions we like are strong crayon-eating barbarians. It allows us to one-shot shit, and it allows us to clear entire maps with the AoE. And how do we explode the earthquakes? Well, that's easy. We just slap on the mantle of Mountain's Fury, and they explode each time we hit them with our Hota. And when they explode, so does your foes. And dick. Alright, back to the Leap version. The only thing we need to solve to play this version of this build is how in the hell we're supposed to leap non-stop. I mean, the cooldown on this fucking thing is like 20 seconds or something. That's crazy high, ain't it? Nah, my man or woman. By grabbing the giant strides aspect, we can reduce its cooldown with up to 7 seconds. All we then need to do to fix the rest of the cooldown is to grab a bunch of leap ranks, as each of them reduces its cooldown in combination with tempering leap cooldown reduction along with brawling cooldown reduction. You can get the former as a mobility temper on your sneakers and amulet, and for the brawling tempers, you can get them on your amulet, rings, and amulet. So basically, 5 cooldown reduction tempers right off the bat. You barely need anything else than tempering, honestly, but to squeeze out the last bit of cooldown reduction, you can also just roll it on your gear or get yourself a Shako. Doing this, and you can even leap constantly without hitting enemies, meaning you can play the game piss drunk with a ferret nibbling on your ballsack, and no one would tell the difference since you'd still slap pit 100s like they're nothing. Alright, enough with the ballsack nibbling. Let's head straight for the planner, and you'll see exactly what you need to make the builds work. And we'll start off with the Leap variant. For the Hota version, you can just follow along in the Leap version and you'll understand everything, as the only difference will be some of your stats and rune choices, which you'll see in the planner. Okay, and the Leap version has both an Uber and a non-Uber build, and the DPS difference is close to 0, while the defensives are higher in the Uber version. You also want to focus a bit more on masterworking the cooldown reduction if you're playing the non-Uber version and want to roll Bold Chieftain's aspect, as to reduce its cooldown as low as possible. In the planner, I instead went with the safe route on one of the rings, using Bear Clan Berserker's aspect, which basically instantly solves the cooldown reduction. But the aspect is shit, and when your cooldown reduction is low enough, you definitely want to swap this aspect for Bold Chieftain's aspect for lower shout cooldowns. Shaco would otherwise pretty much solve that by itself. They're also using the same skills, where we have Leap to spawn the Earthquakes, Ground Stomp, which will reset the cooldown of our ultimate as long as we actually hit stuff with it. This is due to Strategic Ground Stomp in the skill tree, and the ultimate we want to reduce the cooldown off is Call of the Ancients. Using this is just lovely as it provides us with a bunch of damage and damage reduction. Wrath of the Berserker indeed provides us with more damage, but you would need to grab an additional Fury spending skill, or else you can't stack up the damage bonus from it. So going with Call of the Ancients is just way more smooth. We then have the triple shout Wombo Combo, Rallying Cry for movement speed and Fortified Generation, along with War Cry for big fucking damn, and Challenging Shout as I prefer not to die. Using shouts also has another benefit, spawning more Earthquakes, especially if you're able to use the Bold Chieftain's aspect. Alright, let's check out the non-Uber version for the gear. Here we use the Ugly Bastard, which I think we all can relate with. This is due to the humongous DPS increase it provides, up to 100%. That's just disgustingly broken. You'll then focus on masterworking the aggressive resistance, as the rest of the stats are fucking useless for us. Next up, we have Mantle of Mountains Fury. And why the hell are we using this? Wasn't this one for the Hota build? Yeah, but the chance for Earthquakes to deal double damage is a huge damage bonus for us. We can't temper that stat, so it's basically just a flat, multiplicative damage bonus that we will otherwise have to skip, and that I don't want to do. The defensive stance is also fairly solid, but focus on masterworking the Earthquake damage for sure. After that, we have Vehement Brawler's aspect. This thing is pretty great. Not only does it provide us with multiplicative damage that we should be able to keep up permanently, but it also provides us with additional ranks for our ultimate, further decreasing its cooldown. When it comes to the stats, always focus on strength. You want to get that shit as high as possible, which is due to Executioner's aspect turning the thing into multiplicative damage. Yummers. Other than that, just follow along the stats in the planner and you'll be fine. There is, however, one important thing here, and that is damage to close enemies. You need to go for this temper on some of your items and damage while berserking on the other items. This is due to the Perragons. Let's check it out. For the damage to close, we have the Force of Nature node. This thing grants us a whopping 200% damage bonus for our Earthquakes, so we have to cap that shit. To do that, we need 500% damage to close. The same goes for the damage while berserking. We also have a node that we need to get capped called Blood Rage. This thing requires 450% damage while berserking. This may sound rough, but it's actually easy as hell as long as you spread out your tempers. You don't even have to masterwork that shit. Next we have the Pantaloonies. Iron Blood's aspect is the name of the game, allowing for a bunch of damage reduction. And when it comes to making enemies bleed, we have the Outburst passive in the skill tree to deal with that when combined with Tough as Nails. For the sneakers, we have some important things to talk about. First out is the aspect. Concussive Strikes not only grants us a bunch of big damn, but also a bunch of crowd control. But more importantly, we want leap ranks and leap cooldown reduction. This is massive to reduce the cooldown of our leap, which we desperately need. Unless you're rocking the Hota version, of course, then you'd just go with max life or whatever. Alright, and then we have the weapons. Here we have some massive new damage aspects. For starters, Aspect of Earthquakes is just fucking bonkers, providing us with 120% additional damage on a two-hander. Actually nuts. The same goes for the other two-hander. We have yet another 120% damage aspect here called incendiary fissues. For the one-handers, you would then go for the executioner's aspect, which turns your strength into multiplicative damage and aspect of elements, as there's nothing else we can use really. When it comes to the stats, you're still focusing on the strength and tempering damage to close and damage while berserking, but you also need to spread out your last temper. Chance for earthquakes to cast twice is capped at 100%, so you'll grab it on a two-hander and one-hander and masterwork that shit until it's capped. For the other weapons, you'll then go for the heavy hitter passives, which you'll find all the way down in the ultimate passives in the skill tree for a whopping 15% big damn per rank. And finally, my friends, we get to the jewelry, and first off we have the amulet. The Bulkathos aspect is actually disgusting. It spawns earthquakes, it grants us damage reduction, and a bunch of damage. The perfect trifecta of bonuses. For the stats, you're grabbing cooldown reduction if you need it, along with strength and heavy-handed, and temper cooldown reductions for your leap. The heavy-handed one is important, so listen up, damn it. This thing increases our crit damage by 6% per rank, but only if we use a two-handed weapon. This means you need to set leap to a two-hander. And which two-hander should you set it to? Well shit, Wallop decided that for us. You want to set it to your two-handed mace, as to benefit from both of these passives. For the rings, you go for Bear Clan Berserker's aspect only if you need the cooldown reduction. And how do you know if you need it? Well, go test it, you lazy fuck. If you need it to keep leaping, then you of course grab it, and if not, you go for Bold Chieftain's aspect. Simple as that. As long as you then have the Giant Strides aspect, you should be fine. Here, you also need to temper Lucky Hit, chance to make enemies vulnerable, as it is your only source of applying it. Fortunately, the Lucky Hit on leap is high as hell, so as long as you leap once or twice onto your enemies, you'll make them vulnerable. And for my final mention here, you deal a buttload of additional damage when you're critting, mainly due to heavy-handed, but also due to the witch powers, making crit chance highly valuable. Well damn, great job friends. Gear complete. Let's see how we set up the runes and witch powers now. For the runes, the YEL in combination with tech is how we spawn the most of our earthquakes, as you should know by now. For the other rune combination, I'm rocking back in combination with Gar as to increase our crit chance. You can also swap out Gar for additional defensives, for example, Dark Shroud ranks or max life. If you have any issues with the defensives, then you should absolutely do that. When it comes to the witch powers, I'm showing you what I believe to be the optimal setup. This setup takes a while to obtain though, as it utilizes Friend of the Bog. This fucking thing requires you to use 3 growth and decay powers, so here's a tip. If you're just starting off, feel free to ditch Aura of Siphoning and Hex of Whispers if you want crit chance or defensives. The world is your oyster, and you are free to do whatever the hell you want with the witch powers. In any way, optimally, you want to get Piranhado for the pull, in combination with Aura of Specialization for the massive damage bonus. For this one to work, you need to get an Aura, and for that, we're rocking Aura of Siphoning, which also heals us. We then grab Soul Harvest for the additional strength, because strength good, and make Barb very strong. After that, it's time for Hex of Shattering, which provides us with a huge damage reduction bonus as long as our witch powers deals damage, which we do not only via Aura of Siphoning, but also via Hex of Whispers. This also helps out with the Fortify, allowing us to keep it up permanently. And of course, it's a growth and decay power for Friend of the Bog. Alright, and then to the jewels. The runes should be in your weapons, and the rest of the weapons you can slot in emeralds in. This is so that we can socket in more ruby gems in our armor for some yummy strength. And finally, the new gems. When you're obtaining these, I'd focus on Friend of the Bog, as it's just a disgusting damage bonus for this build, followed by Duststone and finally Toadling's Wish. Once you have these, you'll delete all content for sure. Well, damn, my friends, we've come a long way now. If you're still here, perhaps consider dropping a sub. If you don't want to, that's fine as well. But you can indeed go fuck yourself. Anyhow, let's check out the Mercenary now, shall we? I'm also mentioning the weapon technique. It's two-handed axe mastery, as with every goddamn Barb build. For the Mercenary, Subo is the fucking man. Seeker provides us with wall hack, which is crazy strong seeing as we're able to see every enemy on the map before we leap on top of them. Oh, and by the way, we can leap through a lot of walls, making this thing even better. We then grab Wire Trap and Ready Hand, because what else? Followed by Cover Fire, which we want to combine with Opening Fire for the additional crit damage. As you can see, it's just crit damage after crit damage. So don't sleep on the crit chance, folks, or else we can't utilize these. For reinforcement, we then grab Raher and his Bastion, as to not fucking dial Mao, and that, my friends, are the Mercenaries. Now it's time for the skill tree and Perragons. Let's do it. Starting us off, we have no need for any of those shitty basic skills. Rather, get Warpath, which, by the way, we are relying on luck to use, as we're mainly just grabbing this to get to the next tree. Here we find some good shit, though. Ground Stomp is used to reset our ultimate via Strategic Ground Stomp. Rallying Cry is in turn mainly used for the Fortify, but also movement speed when we need to run somewhere. Tough as Nails is how we make our enemies bleed, that is, via them hitting us and thorns in turn, damaging them and causing them to bleed. Mr. Perra, Gaming Big Dick Senpai, and why do we even need bleed in the first place? We're not using it anywhere so far. Hey, chill the fuck out. We will, in the Perragons. Just hold on, one thing at a time. We of course want Challenging Shout, or else we'll die, and also War Cry for the massive damage bonus it provides. We'll max it out as we want a whole lot of damage. We then have some boring-ass passives in combination with Battle Fervor, which will be our way of gaining Berserking. That is, via leaping and triggering it. Whenever we miss our leaps, we also have Enhanced Leap, which at least reduces its cooldown by 4 seconds. This also means that if you successfully manage to get the cooldown down below 4 seconds, then you'll be able to leap without hitting a single enemy. Pretty great, huh? Yeah. In the Weapon Mastery tree, all we want are the yummy passives for additional damage. The best passives, however, are in the Ultimate tree. Heavy Hitter is just absolutely disgusting, granting 15% damage per rank. And we're able to get upwards of 10 ranks on our weapons for, let's just calculate what that amounts to. Yep, a buttload of big hecking damn. We also have Heavy-Handed and Wallop, which we talked about earlier for additional damage, and Call of the Ancients for both damage and damage reduction. On top of that, we also gain a bunch of friends, making us incredibly popular. And finally, the key passive. The only one that doesn't suck a massive ballsack is the Unconstrained passive, allowing for a slight damage increases and a bit of damage reduction. The rest of them are just god-awful and can't be used in a meaningful way. So unconstrained we go. Alright, so that's the skill tree. And about time, as it's indeed time for the Perragons. The goal here is simple. Get as much strength as possible as it double dips, both granting a damage bonus from itself and the Executioner's aspect. The rest of the Perragons is mainly just solving for different caps, and taking the glyphs that are the least useless. For starters, Rumble. This is by far the best glyph we have, as it does 3 things. It provides us with a huge additive earthquake damage bonus, it grants us massive multiplicative damage bonuses, and it utilizes strength. It's absolutely perfect, so max it out first. We then go for Force of Nature, which we have to cap via damage to close, and slap on the Might glyph for additional damage, along with boosting the nearby damage to close enemies to help with the cap for Force of Nature. After that, we go for Blood Rage, which you need damage while berserking to solve. I've helped you out with that, socketing Martial to boost the nearby berserking nodes in combination with grabbing some additional nodes here. After that, it's time for Decimator. A lovely glyph granting us damage against vulnerable enemies along with an additional 20% when we get an overpower. We then socket Challenger and boost as many strength nodes as humanly possible. And finally, the Weapon Mastery Board. Previously completely useless, it now provides a huge damage bonus. We then socket Ire, which utilizes strength, grants us damage while berserking, and multiplicative damage to close. Absolutely lovely. Well shit, Perragons complete. There's but one thing left now, and that is to get hecking good, and you know it, baby. Let's do it. As a wise man once said, to understand a build is the tough part. To play it is fucking brain dead. Because what do we actually do here? If you said leap, then you are absolutely correct. You leap on top your enemies, spawn a few earthquakes, and leave. Now in this footage, I played like a dogshit newbie, and I'll explain why. Each earthquake you spawn is up for 4 seconds. So if you know that an enemy will die in the 4 seconds after you've spawned your earthquakes, then there is no reason to stay and jump on top of them, other than for the pure disrespect. So if you know they'll die, just keep on leaping, baby, and get the hell out of there. When it comes to the other skills, we first have the triple shout wombo combo. What do I mean by this? Well, if you want to, you can spawn 6 earthquakes at once when you pop your shouts. Each one of them spawn an earthquake, which we double and give to the next person via our tempers. So if you truly want to nuke something, you shout at them. You can, however, also use them when needed. For example, challenging shout as you're getting pounded to stay alive. But more often than not, you're just pressing them whenever they're off cooldown, as that is the simplest way of playing. And finally, the ground stomp and ultimate. The ultimate you use whenever it is off cooldown, and the ground stomp you use to reset the cooldown back again. The more enemies you hit with your ground stomp, the more the cooldown will be reduced by up to 15 seconds. So make sure to actually hit enemies with it if you want to keep using your Call of the Ancients. Alright, and that's all you need to know about the Leap version. And what about the Hotter version? Well, shit. It's the same as I've said a bunch of times already. The only difference is that you're spamming Hahote instead of Leap. Okay, friends, that's all for this one. Drop a sub and I'll see you in the next one.